Our dog likes to run up that. It's really fun. So.
Thank you. All right, I'm Director Trevor Dehart, Zone 1. I'm gonna be filling in for Chair Brown and I guess Chair Shannon's not here at this time. So I'm gonna call this meeting to order, the Newburgh School District 29J Budget Committee meeting to order on this May 2nd, 2023 at 6:02 p.m. First order of business is to elect budget committee officers. And I'll open the floor to any recommendations. This meeting to order the Newburgh School District 29J Budget Committee meeting to order on May 2nd, 2023 at 6:02 p.m. We'll start on this side. First order of business is to elect budget committee officers. Open.
Get your button on. What's up? There.
Presentations.
There you go.
My name is Dawn Paulson. This is my first time here.
Oh.
I was nominated last week. That's all I got. What else do you want me to say? Okay.
Yeah. Welcome aboard.
My name is Kim Mihailov. I am the Zone 7
My name is Dawn Paulson.
committee
This
appointee.
is my first time
I
here.
have a background
was
in
nominated
HOA
last week.
management and accounting and
What else do you want me to say?
managing a nonprofit 501c3 here in the county as their treasurer. So I've been on the budget committee for this is my second term now. Zone 7.
My name is Beth Stats. I'm a Zone 1 appointee. I'm also been on the budget committee for about 8 years.
I'm Kat McNeil. I am Zone 6, which is Dave Brown zone, and I have been
My
on
name
the
is
budget
Beth Stats.
committee
I'm a
12
Zone
years.
1 appointee. I'm also
maybe
been
10,
on the budget committee
I don't
for
know,
about 8 years.
2013,
On time.
10.
Melissa Daly. This is my second term of budget committee. And I am in zone 5, which is this Edwards district that we're in right now.
All right, I'm Trevor Dehart. I'm Zone 1 School Board Director. Been on the board for 2 years now. And so I guess I've been on the budget committee for 2 years now.
I'm Renee Powell and I'm Zone 5 and I've also been a board member for 2 years.
All right.
I am Raquel Peregrino de Brito. I have been appointed in March 2022. So I was part of the budget committee last year. And I am in District 4 or Zone 4.
I'm Renee Powell and I'm Zone 4.
I'm Shelley Kolb. I'm a board member for District 2, and I was appointed last July, so this will be my first time going through this.
Steve Phillips, Superintendent.
Scott Lindenberger, HR Director.
Heather Bixby, Director of Finance, and I have been here since the middle of
Board
August.
member For District 2, and I was appointed last.
Awesome.
July.
Well, thanks for volunteering for this and giving of your time. So, and your expertise. Sounds like a lot of you have been on this for quite a while and or have great experience in budgeting and finance. So thank you.
Director of Finance, and I have been here since August.
So bear with me here. So the next order of business is to elect budget committee officers. So I'll open up the floor to anybody that would like to recommend or volunteer for chair or vice chair. Chair, yeah. So bear with me here.
Well,
So,
I nominate Kat McNeil
the
to be
next order
the
of
chair
business is
of
to
budget
elect
committee.
budget
She's done it in the past and
officers.
leads us well. I think knows the bylaws better than most of us, if not all of us.
Kat, do you accept?
Yeah, yeah.
Any other recommendations? Need a second.
I'll second Kat.
Leads us well. He knows the bylaws better than us.
Anyone else? Kat, do you accept? Okay. If there's no one else, I'll open it up to a vote. All those in favor of electing Kat as the chair of the budget committee, please raise your right hand. All right, unanimous. Anyone else? Congratulations.
Thank you. And I will go ahead and take over
If
from
there's
here.
no one else, I'll
Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Pat as the chair of the budget committee. Please raise your right hand.
I would nominate Kim Mihailov for vice chair.
All right.
I second.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Discussion?
I just want to say I nominated Kim because she's done her homework. She'd already printed out a budget book. She's reviewed it and she's on top of things.
Any other discussion?
I have no objections.
I
I know
second.
Kim has experience and has been
vice chair?
around this, so I have no problem.
Discussion? All those in favor, please go ahead and raise your right hand. Opposed? Abstaining? Kim is our vice chair. I'm going to go ahead and turn over the meeting to Dr. Phillips for our budget message.
Thank you. I will read the budget message. It's a one pager. 2023, 2024 Superintendent's Budget Message, May 2nd, 2023. Presented in the following pages are the 2023-2024 proposed budget. This budget was developed to ensure that all students will graduate with the knowledge and skills needed to be successful, contributing citizens of the 21st century. Newburgh Public Schools is committed to this vision for all students at every grade level. Budget message. This budget is representative of the continuing struggles that schools and students across the country are continuing to face. Post-pandemic enrollment declines and looming fiscal funding cliffs have all played a role in budget development. Newburgh Public Schools has seen a decline in enrollment over the past 10 years, which correlates to a decline in student enrollment across the state. Newburgh Public Schools is currently working on programs to encourage enrollment, including working with homeschool families, expanding online learning options, improving career technical education opportunities, and promoting student mental and physical well-being. This budget is based on the governor's proposed state school fund budget of $9.9 billion. This accounts for approximately 51% of the proposed general fund for Newburgh Public Schools. Tax collections are 31% of general fund revenue, and the remainder of the revenues in the general fund come from fees, contracts, and carryover funds. In contrast, 81% of expenditures in the general fund are payroll and benefits and support 446.8 FTE or full-time employees. There are many important things to remember as we go through the 2023-24 school year. Extra grants that were received during COVID-19 are ending. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund 2, ESSER 2, will expire on September 30th of 2023. Currently, the governor's proposed budget does not include enough funding for summer learning grants. Loss of these grants places a huge burden on school districts to negotiate between services that were provided under these grants and what a district can continue to fund without these grants. Notable projects for the 23-24 school year include purchasing the new district-wide math curriculum, construction of the new Dundee Elementary School, adding an additional school resource officer in partnership with the city of Newburgh, completing HVAC upgrades throughout the district, completing the remodel of the Support Advocacy for Independence in Life, the CEL program, CEL facilities, and a continued focus on student mental and physical well-being. The proposed budget for Newburgh Public Schools focuses on maintaining current staffing, increasing math interventions for students, and continuing work on scheduled bond projects. Through conservative fiscal spending, exploring new grant opportunities, and community partnerships, Newburgh Public Schools is excited to roll out the new school year and continue to support the students of Newburgh and Dundee. Respectfully, Stephen W. Phillips, Superintendent, Newburgh.
Can I ask a quick question, Dr. Phelps? Do we have a strategic plan to go with the budget message?
No.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start with the basic. Well, that's gonna be hard to overview of kind of some of the things to expect and to look for in the budget. So first, I just want to point out what the vision is of Newburgh Public Schools. And the Newburgh School District students will graduate with the knowledge and skills needed to be successful contributing citizens of the 21st century. Can you? Hey, Scott. It's not advancing. Okay. And then the mission statement is in partnership with parents and our community, the Newburgh School District will educate all students to achieve their full potential as knowledgeable, self-assured citizens ready for college and or careers. And then we'll just kind of highlight some of the priorities of the district, provide the high quality, well-rounded and healthy educational experience to all students, build strong relationships with families, community, and students to promote trust, support, and collective responsibility for student success, ensure every classroom has a high quality, effective educator supported by strong leadership and staff, align resources to accomplish goals within a balanced budget, plan systematically and strategically so NPS continues to succeed and thrive in the future. So when we, a few weeks ago, we met and we kind of discussed some of the purpose and the responsibilities of the budget committee. And since we had some new faces here, I thought we would just kind of go over those just quickly again. So our purpose is to create a spending authority for public funds, present a balanced financial plan that estimates the revenue and expenditures for next year, certify property taxes for the county assessor, receive public comment over proposed district spending, and discuss the proposed budget document and make a well-educated recommendation to the school board for adoption. So your role as a budget committee member is to hear the budget message, receive the proposed budget and review the proposal, hear from the public, engage in constructive conservative conversations about the proposed budget, ensure that the budget aligns with district priorities, and approve the budget and tax rate for adoption. So in the document that has, that I've provided all of you a copy of the most recent revised one, what is presented to you is a completely balanced budget. The budget document is formatted to ODE's request. Expenditures are separated out by cost center. And if you don't know what a cost center is, that would be the district-wide expenses and then each one of our locations for schools. There are separate budgets for COA and for Catalyst. So COA is our online academy and Catalyst is our alternative education. And then I just want to make everybody aware that the liability insurance increase of 20% is due to all the new construction with the bond. So that was just something I wanted to point out. So this next slide represents teacher experience. Yes.
Does it work for you to ask questions now, or do you want us to wait till the end?
Whatever works best for you.
I have 2 questions about role.
Okay.
Do we have any ad hoc members? In the past, we had licensed ad hoc and classified ad hoc.
No, we do not this year.
Okay. And then is there anyone taking minutes? Okay, thanks. Thank you.
So, and we are also recording this. So the link to the YouTube video will be available and will be posted online so people can go back and review it if they don't have time to participate this evening. So. Okay, so this slide, I was asked during our last meeting about teacher experience. So I just did a little bit of research to see where our teacher experience rating was in comparison to the state. And even though we have seen just a very slight drop in our teacher experience rating, it is still maintaining above the state average. So I just wanted to show that to you guys. So this is the range from from 2018 to what is projected for 23-24. The next one is our student enrollment. And I thought about going back just like 3 or 4 years, but then there's the whole COVID in the middle of that. And every school saw a huge decline in enrollment during COVID. So I went back a little farther just so that we could kind of see what the trend was prior to COVID as well. So as you can see from this example, the enrollment, and this is actual students in the building, is declining slightly, and it has been for several years, since about 2017. That was the first year that it started dropping, which was a few years before COVID. You're fine.
It's awkward, but the older I get. Heather, do you mind reading out those numbers? Because I
Yeah.
see the graph. I have no idea what the numbers. say.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the first one is your 2013, 2014, and it shows enrollment of 5,173. In 2014, 2015, it was 5,142. In 2015, 2016, it was 5,217. In 2016, 17, it was 5,209. In 2017, 2018, it dropped to 5,077. In 18, 19, it dropped to 4,952. In 19, 20, it dropped again and went to 4,847. In 2020, 2021, which was our first year of like not in-person learning, went to 4,455. In 21, 22, it went to 4,340. And in 22, 23, it went to 4,193.
Also, will all these presentation be available?
Yes, I can certainly email it to you if you'd like to have it.
Okay, because that'd be another way of people seeing it.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so any questions about that? I just wanted to kind of include that for some historical information. Okay, so we're going to talk about budget assumptions. This budget presented to you is based on the state school funding of 9.9 billion, which is the governor's and the co-chairs both proposed budget. This is based on a 49-51 split because it is a biennial budget. They account for some roll up in the second year. So they only give you 49% the first year, and then the second year they give you 51%. This is based on enrollment of 4,157. And it's also accounts for high cost disability of 57 students. A county tax increase of about 6% based on current collections. And when I say current collections, I mean where we're at year to date and not necessarily what was budgeted for last year. So when you look at it comparatively to last year, it's about 9% higher. But where we're at right now, if we do a 6% increase, then we come up with the new number. It's based on a beginning fund balance of 8.5 million. And it's also based on bond work being completed on time. So staying on schedule, staying on track. Okay. Questions about that? Okay, so some important payroll assumptions. PERS is going up for our OPSERP employees. It's going from 5.95% to 6.77%. And tier 1, tier 2 is going from 9.06 to 9.61. We have factored in a 2.5% cost of living for licensed admin and the confidential, professional, technical groups. That is based off of the collective bargaining agreement that was negotiated last year with the licensed staff. Classified negotiations are still taking place. So we did kind of a tentative placeholder at 4%. There's a $50 insurance cap increase for all staff. And then paid leave Oregon will start in September, and that will cost the district 0.27% of payroll. But on the upside, we did have a decrease in our workers' comp modification rate. And so we will actually see a slight decrease in our workers' comp rates for next year. So some other considerations, in December of 2023, we have our final payment on the recruit and retention bonuses. We are increasing the SRO from 1 FTE to 2. We are adding math interventionists at all secondary schools. The budget that is presented to you maintains the current staffing and current programs. We correctly account for all levels of COA. In the current budget, it was all budgeted under elementary school. And so we've taken it out of that and made it an alternative education option for the COA students. And we've split it into a subgroup that identifies each level of education. We are also going to be doing a math curriculum adoption, and that's estimated to be around $1 million. So the next slide, I just wanted to kind of show you some visuals of what the major revenue categories look like in the general fund. So in this one, the state revenue is the state school fund. There's a small amount there for state grants. The local revenue, this is our taxes. So that's our second biggest piece of the pie. Other sources are maybe your fees. There's your beginning fund balance falls in there. And then your intermediate revenue, which is your countywide payments that come into the school, like county tax payments. Not the property tax, but it's a different tax.
I have a quick question in
Yes.
regards to that.
Uh-huh.
Can we go back? Thank you. Local revenue is our property taxes, correct?
Local revenues are property taxes, yes.
Are we gonna look at that later in the slide presentation?
As far as
Numbers?
what,
So my question is, property taxes have been projected higher
Mhm.
than what they were reported to ODE. So they were budgeted at 200,300,000, but reported at 18,800,000. And I was just wondering about that difference.
they were reported at what?
18,800,000
What was the first, I'm sorry, what was the first number that you came?
to 20,300,000.
Okay, for which years?
They were budgeted at 20,300,000, but they were reported to ODE at 18,800,000.
Are you talking, so the 18 million is this year's budget,
Mhm.
and what we've actually brought in is higher than that. So we projected revenue to be even higher than that for next year.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
so
just
we
wanted to
added,
clarify.
so the year to date, what we've brought in year to date. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking it's like right around $19,000. And so we did, or 19,000.
Yeah. That's not good.
No, so we added a 6% increase on our current year to date and where we anticipate being by the end of the year. So we still have 2 additional payments coming in. For taxes for this year, for May and for June. So we estimate what those are going to be and then added 6% to that to try and get a more accurate number of where we would be for tax collection for next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize if that was confusing.
You're fine. Okay. So I also wanted to show you what the major expenditures by major function in the general fund look like. So you can see the largest part of this is instruction. So when we're looking at the budget, these are all of our 1,000 funds or our 1,000 functions, and they are direct instruction to students. The support services is all of your counselors, your special therapy, your board, your principals, your fiscal services, the maintenance, custodians, HR, technology, all of those things fall into the purple section. And then like your contingency at the end of the year is your yellow section. Unappropriated ending fund balance is the blue. And your other is a little tiny line in there that is basically like your dues and fees. Just a really small portion of your budget. It's like $18,000, so it doesn't show very well on this graph. And then the next one breaks them down by object. So you can see that 49% being wages, 32% being benefits. Services, this is paying somebody to come in and do a service for you. Accounts for about 11% of the major object budget. Supplies is a very small portion. Capital projects aren't typically seen in the general fund, so that is also a very small piece. Other objects, dues and fees, your insurance payments, transfers and contingencies are in red, and reserves are in yellow. So we're talking about revenue. Yes, sorry.
So quick question when it comes to those major functions. So the revised proposed budget does not have the lines added for major functions to be able to see your totals per grouping.
Right. I realized that I left that off.
Okay, so is there a plan to add that back in
Yes.
and then we'll have a new revised budget to look
Yes,
at?
I can add that back in if that would make it more helpful for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, I can add those back in tomorrow and have those emailed out to you again tomorrow and correct the posting on the website as well. Okay.
Can we go back?
Yep.
So if I look at it, we're at 49%,
Okay, that slide.
32%
Oh.
more.
All right, this slide, did you, okay, okay,
Sorry,
yes.
this is new fancy technology
Okay.
for me. When I look at wages and I look at benefits, that is the majority of our cost, which is at 81%. Which is up. Let's see, what year is this? Which is up 3% from last year.
Okay.
Is that due? Tell me about that and budget wise and our budget. I'd like to talk about that later after we go through everything, the increase in wages and benefits with a smaller budget.
Okay. Do you want me to address it now or do you want me to wait?
Honestly, whatever works for you, because I feel like I'm like interjecting like your groove.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. This is my first year doing a budget for you guys. So you know, feel free to direct me whichever way you want me to go. I can tell you that we did add some positions into next year's budget. Whether it was through SPED placement or ELD, some of those we had budgeted in SIA, and we moved those expenditures into the general fund because SIA isn't growing as fast as wages are growing. So we would move some of those wages into the general fund. The other thing that we did is we took a really strong focus on math for next year. And as such, we decided that we needed to add some additional math supports at the secondary level. So we increased and added 3 new positions.
Math, as in the assessment, math.
Math, yep, just
Math.
math.
Sorry.
No, math, like, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
Arithmetic.
thank you.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, so while there's not a huge increase in the actual budget between this year and last year, one of the things that we did focus on was some of the less spending in non-critical areas or putting money as placeholders in less critical areas and focusing more on the instruction of students. Needing to increase staff sizes in some schools just because they needed more because of the size of the classes they had coming in. You know, we had several schools that maybe had large kindergarten classes that were going to move into the first grade, and maybe they needed 2 first grade classrooms, but they only had 1. And so we would add a teacher to that as well. So we did add some additional FTE, but we were able to add those without cutting the essential funding budget wise. But our primary focus was on educating the students and making sure that they had the supports in place that they needed.
I have a follow-up, 2 follow-up questions on that.
Okay.
One of them I probably just missed and didn't see, but the enrollment for, actually I did, 22-23 is 4,193. Can you tell me, when you say that you needed to add class sizes, was that in a majority of the secondary or was that in the majority of the primary?
I will say that's majority of primary. So a lot of those were 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade classes, where we have really large classrooms, but we didn't significantly have enough reduction on either end of that to move teachers from the 1st grade into the 2nd grade, or to shift FTE in the building. Or we had incoming projections for kindergarten classes that might be larger.
Okay. When we're looking at the enrollment decline,
Mhm.
where's most of our decline coming from, secondary or elementary?
I would have to pull that number and get back to you. I think it's pretty spread out.
Okay, and I asked because I know some of our, I don't have exact building size numbers, so I am curious about that, like how much does each building have, like a hot body student count, right? So I'm curious on how much each building has that capacity for students. Because I think from the numbers I've seen at some of the other board members, those are quite a bit smaller. So if I look at Austin, the capacity is a larger for that building than what there is current student. So just as we talk about budgets and student enrollments.
Yeah. And I can certainly provide those numbers to you tomorrow, like when I email out the budget document, I can send you out the enrollment per school. Because that's something I just realized I did not include in this. But I have that historical data, so I can send that to you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a follow-up question with that, I would be interested in seeing the metrics on how many kids per school, if you have like breakdowns like for total cohorts for grade levels, so you can kind of see, okay, well, we have this great big, 1st grade class and now they're moving up. That helps to justify the numbers, and also understanding the average class sizes that we're looking at for the different schools, just understanding, like, obviously you can't fit, 40 kids in class. That's not effective, so understanding our average class size is, less than 20 versus more than 30. I think that would help to understand the numbers and FTEs.
Yeah, and I can tell you at the elementary level, we tried to keep class sizes at 25 or lower. And at the secondary, between 25 and 30 was our ideal class range. So that's what kind of where we based whether or not they would need additional staff. But I can send those numbers to you so that you can see the before and where they're transitioning to.
Yeah. Do we look? All right. Go ahead. Do we look at splits or blends when we're creating that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we like to listen to what the principal wants, what the principal needs, and what's going to work best for the kids. So there's been splits and blends. We are trying to eliminate those if we can. But yeah, we've used them in the past.
Other questions?
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no, that's great. Okay. So just on revenue, just a couple of key points. The general fund, we are estimating an $8.5 million beginning fund balance. Some things to keep in mind with the grants is the ESSER 2 end date is 9/30 of 23. ESSER 3 end date is 9/30 of 24. There is no COVID summer learning / enrichment grants this year. And then when you're looking at state grants, those are things like our outdoor school, our My Future, My Choice, Aspire, CTE pathways. Those are just some of the different grants you'll see in there. When we look at private donations, the city of Newburgh, one of the additions I made to your budget was adding the $152,237 that the city just gave us to help fund the SRO and drug awareness programs. So I added that as a private donation. Another large private donation received this year that hasn't been spent. It was a private donation that came in for the Newburgh High School Athletics Department. And that one, I believe, was around $63,000. So that one was pretty significant. You have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask away.
I'm just gonna ask away.
Uh-huh.
Keep touching it. I should just leave it on, right? Sorry for anyone who doesn't know me very well yet. Okay. Private city, the new SRO, is that 100% funded wages and benefits from the city, or is there a portion that the district's funding?
So in the current year, and forgive me, I'm not sure how far back it goes, but they budgeted money for the SRO out of SIA. So it was a partial funding of a contract with the city for that SRO staff, but it didn't really equate to one full FTE.
Okay.
So we would pretty much have the SRO all during the school year. This will add 2 SROs that we have at our disposal pretty much all school year. And the donation they made, we can use to help fund that position. So the total cost for that, the SRO service from the city is going up to about $297,000 per year. And then they're giving us the $152,000, and we have the additional money budgeted out of SIA because it is an allowable expense under student safety.
Kat, may I just say that you should ask all the questions that you feel that are pertinent and important, and you should not hold back.
Not
because,
usually, but
you know,
it's
you have a really good insight of the budget, so we appreciate your questions. So,
thank you. It's a new board, so I'm not as familiar with the comfort level. I do have another question.
Okay.
I just have to find it. What was our total amount that we received for ESSER funds as a district?
Since the inception of it?
Yes.
Oh, I would have to go back and look at those numbers. I would hate to give you wrong numbers.
Yeah, because there's an ESSER 1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
And
Correct.
yeah,
Yes.
and there's actually a CDL grant in there that was kind of part of those as well. So
Correct. What's your anticipation of what the ESSER 2 that's left and the ESSER 3 that is left? What's the rough balance of that?
going into next year, and I believe if I have that broken down in here.
I just can.
So the 4,500 object code that is under federal grants on page 12 for $2,759,210.57 is my estimation of what we have left for the ESSER 2 and 3.
I'm getting there. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have too many questions. How much FTE do we have budgeted out of ESSER grants?
None.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was really important for me to keep FTE out of ESSER because ESSER is going away, and the last thing we want to do is have a funding source that is supporting staff that is going to end. and then not have a way to pay for them. So we tried very hard to keep those out of funds that were not guaranteed to continue. So. Okay. Are we good? Okay, so debt service, which is your 300 funds, these include the Dundee property, PERS bond, the bond payment for all the construction going on, and a Cool Schools loan. But I want to make it a point to point out to you that this year there is a transfer budgeted from the general fund into debt service to cover the interest payment on the Dundee property loan. So when that property was purchased, it was purchased on a short-term real estate loan where only interest was due for the 4 years of the loan, 4 or 5 years of the loan. And then there's a large balloon payment done at the end. I can speculate as to why it was done that way. But without actually sitting down and having a conversation with prior administration, I'm not sure that I could, give you 100% accurate reason as to why that's happening. But there is no revenue coming in for taxes or anything like that to support that payment. So the only way to pay that is through a transfer from the general fund. So you will see a new line item in the general fund as an expense for a transfer to the debt service fund. And you'll see it listed as a revenue on the debt service to account for that payment. Okay.
I do have a
Yeah.
question on that. Go ahead, sorry.
I just curious, as we go through here, the bond, we get interest on that,
We do.
right?
Mhm.
And what happens with that interest?
It's reinvested into the bond program. So all the
And
proceeds.
is that by law, that's a requirement? So we couldn't use that interest to pay the interest on the loan?
You typically don't want to because that money wasn't intended to purchase property.
Mhm.
And there are some restrictions as to what that money can be used for based on what you presented for your bond adoption. And so it's really kind of a gray area, and it wasn't someplace that I'm comfortable making the decision that we're going to use interest off of the bond money to make that payment. It's
Okay.
easier to keep it
Just-
clean and just keep it in the general fund.
How much money are we talking about?
I believe it's right around $32,000 a year. Yes.
Okay, so I do have a question
Uh-huh.
in regards to the Dundee property.
Uh-huh.
I understand that there's payments that need to be made on interest.
Mhm.
What is the timeline and the plan for the property? Because my understanding is that with construction of the new school, that there's plans to sell that property to use those funds to pay off that loan. So what is the timeline we're looking at?
So, yeah, go ahead.
So the current Dundee Elementary, we expect it to be empty summer of next year. And yeah, we plan on selling it. The idea that I've been told from Dr. Morlock was that selling the school site would therefore pay for the new site. And so that's the plan.
So then what budget year would we be looking at potentially for that sale taking place?
Well, I would imagine it wouldn't take place with kids in school until, the middle of June of 24. I would imagine the sale wouldn't happen until July. So therefore it'd be the next budget cycle.
So 24, 25, we would anticipate settling that property to pay off the loan. Yeah, and there is no penalty for paying that loan off early. So even though it's financed out over 5 years, there's no penalty if we pay that off in 2 or 3. So that's something that as soon as the funds are available from the sale of the property, we would pay that loan off and
Okay.
save the interest.
So we're essentially just need to cover interest for the next budget cycle or 2 potentially.
Yes.
And then hopefully recoup those funds and refill that.
Yes.
Okay, understood.
That was the old plan and no one's told me to change it. So
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
And speaking of revenue, on page 22 of this budget book. So we're talking about the revenues for debt service, but there's really not much in there as far as numbers. I'm wondering if there must be an oversight.
So what you're looking at is, and the 300 is an old fund. And so 300, if we roll all the 300 funds down to a 300, we would report those as 300. So there's also the 301 fund, which is also debt service, the 302 fund, which is also debt service, 303 and 304. But we don't budget anything. I didn't budget anything in the 300 fund because there's not really a debt there. So my assumption is that sometime in the past, there was actually a debt that was recorded in Fund 300, the actual number 300, instead of just saying it's a 300 debt fund. So that's why you're seeing that 300 fund in there. We have to report those actual numbers from those prior years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a,
Yes.
sorry. Okay, I have a question in regards to the PERS.
Okay.
So 2022-23 budget was 4,257,570, and we're now proposing 5,436,386. Tell me about the increase.
So these payments, it comes from the beginning fund balance. So when you're collecting on a debt service, typically what you do is you collect more towards the beginning, and as you go on, your payments get bigger. But to level those out, just like in a regular bond payment, we may collect a huge amount of taxes at the beginning. And as you go through your bond payments, those kind of get eaten up a little bit more. So you're collecting an even amount throughout the years, but you may see fluctuations in what the beginning balance becomes in those, so that it can support future year payments.
I understand-ish.
Okay.
Can you give me an example with numbers? Like whole numbers, like thousands or hundreds?
Okay, so
Sorry.
So let's say we're going to collect $2,000 a year for a PERS debt service.
Okay.
But maybe the first year your payments are only $1,000. And then as you progress through those payments, there's some inflation built into that. So that payment goes up a little bit every year. And so maybe by the time you get to the end of a 10-year, you're actually paying closer to that $2,000. Or maybe you're paying $2,200, but you're using the extra money that you collected in the first 10 years to help offset that payment so that you're not continuing to collect higher amounts from everybody.
Okay,
Does that make more sense?
thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Quick question
Yes.
with,
Sorry.
hopefully it's quick. So with the presentation that you have,
Mhm.
I know we're working through slides here. I know quite a few of us seem to have questions where we want to go page by page through the budget.
Uh-huh.
So do we want to do, your presentation and go through that, or do we want to go line by line? I just want to make sure.
I literally have
understand.
one slide left.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you guys some things to pay close attention to.
Okay.
That I wanted to point out that were different from last year. And so those are the things that I'm showing to you now so that you kind of know to look for them. Okay. So expenditures. One of the things that you will notice is that we moved direct expenses that should have been allocated to schools directly to the schools. So one of the corrections I made in the budget was I took something that had been budgeted twice. And that was evident on the first page of expenditures where there was this random $3,000 that was budgeted for supplies, but it was for direct instruction. Well, direct instruction only happens at a school level, and that money had already been budgeted for under the school. So we were able to take that $3,000 out, put it back in the unappropriated ending fund balance. And then because that $3,000 was already budgeted for at the school level. We removed substitute costs from functions that didn't have employees. It would stand to reason, you would only need substitutes if employees were being paid from that fund. So we removed any costs for substitutes there. One of the other places we removed substitutes was from funds and from functions that we would never get a substitute for, like HR. HR would never use, we would not call in a substitute to fill in for Scott. You would not call a substitute to fill in for me. So there's no point in having substitute costs built into those budgets. So we removed substitutes where they weren't necessary. Other than personnel costs, which are wages, benefits, and substitutes, expenditures remain pretty flat throughout the budget, except for small adjustments in utility costs and disbursement of expenses to cost centers. And then we focused really hard on making sure that there was equity and transparency between the cost centers. So if one school had a travel budget for their principal, we wanted to make sure that every school had a travel budget for their principal. Or if they had a principal line item for consumable supplies, we wanted to make sure that everybody had a budget that had a consumable supply in it for their principals, instead of one school having a huge amount and then all the schools using it. We tried to allocate that across the schools in an equitable way. So. Okay, so now.
So I guess we're going to go line by line now, or what's the plan there?
That's
So I think there's some general questions first, and then if there's a need to go line by line, then I think we can go line by line. I know that we end at 9 tonight, and I want to honor that unless somebody else makes a motion to continue it, and we have another meeting. There's also the option, there is enough timeline in there, if we have more questions, that we can add another meeting in there. Although I would like that to be a consideration that we have by the end of the night, because we have to think about publications of meeting notices that need to go out. So I did have a general question in regards to personnel, wages, and salaries. I believe the new licensed contract has stated that they can roll over personal days. Is that accurate?
So there's a limit on the number of personal days that can roll over.
Okay, can you tell me more about that?
So according to their collective bargaining agreement, and Nancy might have to correct me if I'm wrong, because she probably knows it better than I do, since she was in payroll. But I believe if they have personal leave, they can roll over 1 day of personal leave to a maximum of 3 days per year.
I think so. I think that's correct, but I haven't. Since I haven't been doing it, I haven't read that thoroughly either, but I believe they can only take 1 day over.
So they can roll over one.
Right.
I
And then
believe
we
by
have their
contract.
2-year accrual for the next year.
Yeah.
Giving them a total of 3 for the following year.
Okay, so they generally get 2 a year.
Right.
You can roll one over. My question with that is, does that fall under the same law as, sorry, it's time for my medicine. Does that fall under the same law as for businesses where you have to hold that money aside in an account when you roll over personal days or sick days? I know I know sick days do not, but I'm wondering if that is the same for personal days.
So there's a liability that we record in our annual audit for any days that are carried forward. But it's just it's a liability entry just as much as it would be for somebody who gets vacation and still has vacation time at the end of the year. Oh, Jennifer says you can roll up 2 days per year.
Thanks,
and they
Jennifer.
get 3 years per day or 3 days per year. So
3 days per
maximum
year.
of,
5.
they get 3 days, they can roll over 2, so a maximum of 5. But yes, so there's a liability entry that's done on our books to account for that, but we don't actually have to hold that money into a separate fund.
Okay, Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question on the SRO, the grant that we got for that. Is that all to be spent this year, or are we, what happens after this year? Do we have funding next year, or how does that work?
Yeah, so some of it is something that is a year by year, but there is the funding stream that the city got the money from. There's potential to be more money in the future, which is why we created our own donation account for that. So that we could add any additional money that was given to us through the city into that and have it for future payments on SRO. There are some options as far as funding the SRO position this year. If we get to the beginning of the year and it looks like we might still have some of our SR2 money that is available, we can lump sum pay for our SRO contract for up to 5 years. Just to have that SR2 money spent because that is an allowable expense. But we're kind of waiting to make that call until we see where we fall as far as how much money is left that needs to be spent, because we want to focus primarily on curriculum and items that directly affect the kids in the classroom if we can.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question on the donations. You had mentioned that there was a generous donation to the high school that we haven't yet had a chance to spend. When it comes to donations, I know when it's a financial donations, it's a write-off for the person. What if it's a stock donation?
That would be a great question for your personal tax accountant, but I believe, yes, there was, because we did provide a letter stating that there was a donation and what the value of the stock was at the time of the trade-in.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. You don't need to shut it off. You can keep going. Sorry.
No, you're right.
So, okay. Tied in with that, does the school have to pay then taxes once that stock is like cash in?
No, we're in a tax exempt entity, so we don't have to pay taxes on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
I have a question on staffing.
Uh-huh.
So you did mention earlier that there were a few FTE increases from math instruction.
Yes.
Are there increases, decreases, flat for the district?
For staffing?
For staffing.
Increasing. Yes, because we also had to add additional ELD teachers because of the number of dual language students and migrant students that are coming in. We need additional ELD supports and dual language teachers. So we added a few extra of those. The number of SPED kids that we have. We also added some FTE where previously we had been paying contractors for services, like maybe we couldn't find an SLP to fill an SLP, so we contracted with one. And now we've been able to place an actual employee in that position, so that will increase FTE as well.
Can you give an actual figure of the increase?
Yes.
Please.
Yes, so last year's FTE was 527.42, and this year we are at 553.82.
Hey, Heather,
Yes,
maybe I've overlooked it, but for the 23-24 school year, did we, what are we projecting for enrollment? The budget based on?
it's the 51, it was on my slide, sorry, 41, 90, 57, 41, 57.
41.
Yeah.
And 7 student.
And the high cost disability, yes.
I do have a quick follow-up
Yes.
question on the superintendent's budget message.
Mhm.
There is a figure of 466.8 FTE. How does that equate to that staffing number? Sorry, I'm a little confused. On the superintendent's budget message. 1, 2, 3,
so-
fourth paragraph.
The difference is that's specifically general fund.
Okay,
In the budget message, that column is all about general fund. And what percent of wages and benefits compared to the FTE in the general fund. In addition to that, we have some FTE and SIA, we have some in title, we have some in Title III. We also have some in the high school success grant. So there's smaller amounts of FTE that are scattered through some of the special revenue funds. So that number in the budget message is just the general fund.
okay.
Okay.
Understood.
Since we're on the topic of FTE. We're increasing the FTE to 553. When we're talking about that increase, does that also include those that we've lost through attrition? So if we lose 10 through attrition, are we going to fill those 10 and then also the other new FTE positions?
Yes.
That's the intention.
Yeah.
Okay.
The intention is not to cut any of the instructional positions that we currently have, either at the classified level or at the license level.
Okay. How much of that increase in FTE is administration?
Two.
And can you tell me about that?
Two, we added an assistant principal at Edwards and a 0.5 FTE assistant principal at Joan Austin and Crater.
Can you tell me about the addition of assistant principals on schools with under 350 students?
Yeah, we're seeing a dramatic increase in student behavior issues. And our administration, our staff need help. And so we posted a position to have a assistant principal to be shared between Crater and JA. So they can help with student discipline, student behavior, help the teachers out, help the principal out, so the principal can act as an instructional leader and help classroom instruction rather than working with student behavior all day. And then Edwards, basically the same reason. They're flirting with 500 kids, and just it's a good investment for our kids and for our staff.
Do we have behavior specialists in the district?
Not I mean, we have not by title. I mean, we obviously have some behavior. We have some great teachers that work with kids and stuff, but not by title.
Thank you.
Follow-up question with that. If there's behavior issues, would you go towards counselors versus a assistant principal?
Those buildings have counselors.
So would you not like it? So I'm guess I'm not understanding how like.
I think it comes down to an educational philosophical perspective of whether or not you have an assistant administration work with behavior, or if you have a licensed hired as a behavior specialist to then support behavior. That's what it just comes down to that.
Yeah, and I shouldn't have said that this administrator will only work on behavior. I mean, this administrator can also evaluate staff, which takes some load off the principal. A vice principal and assistant principal can do more, a broader array of things than a counselor can. They're more versatile.
Okay. All right, I do have a question on the budget committee listing. Can we please update the terms on there for Judy Croft and myself? Because we've both been appointed for an additional term and that's not reflected.
And the poor guy that wanted his name off of the list.
There's somebody on the mailing list.
Yes, I actually responded to him that very night and apologized sincerely for missing the one on his email, on the email address. So the email address was identical to one of our new appointees, except it had a 1 after the name and not. So I apologized to him profusely and we got that corrected immediately.
Also, if we can correct the expiration of my term as well. It should be 6/30/23.
Thank you.
Okay, just a general question. For the budget committee schedule that we have. This is our main budget committee meeting. Where we have lots of important stuff to discuss. Just a general question, why don't we have all seats filled? I mean that we have, of this 14-member group, we have 5 people not present in their chairs to discuss the budget.
You'd have to ask them, as they're not here to, we cannot answer on their behalf.
So, with looking at the calendar and we have a penciled in meeting for May 16th. Does that date work for everybody? Can we meet that schedule? I just want to make sure, because I want everybody to be here to discuss the budget. It's kind of hard to discuss it when we don't have everybody here. So if we need to change that date, later when we discuss, then so be it. Let's change it, make sure everybody's here.
I would suggest that we discuss, we have a forum. And we should discuss in depth and in detail as we can, and others can watch it later if not, but we should not hold back. Because there are a few people who are meeting, we should just full throttle it and they can catch up later. I'd hate for us to, because our time is valuable too, and we made it, so we should definitely work as if everybody was here. That's my perspective.
Okay. Cool. So. Guess.
I have a question to start.
Yeah.
Can I start with a question?
Absolutely.
All right, so I am looking here at page 12. On the state revenue, we look at, and we talked briefly about this earlier and it caught my eye and I want to look at it. So for the 2022-2023 budget, we had budget for line 4,500. $7,777,412. But if I look at, that's a very different number from the actuals from the previous year and very different number from the proposed for this year. So can you tell me a little bit of why is that $7 million? Why is it so high? What is that?
Okay, so most of what you're seeing here is the availability of ESSER funds. So in all of the ESSER funds, 1, 2, and 3, and then some additional COVID funding that came in, you're seeing that in the 22-23, the district budgeted for the majority of the spend of those dollars. And so what you'll see is that taper off as it should be because those grants are coming to an end. So that high peak in 22-23 is just the balance of what they had left to spend from the funding as it was allocated across to the districts.
Thank you for explaining that. Appreciate it.
I have a question on that one too,
Yes.
since we're there. So when I look back, I have like 3 budget books here from prior years. And so the numbers here in 201 for the federal grants that I'm seeing, none of these actuals
Mhm.
and budgeted match up with prior budgets that I have. Now, it's here and there from others, but this is one of the ones that across the board didn't have the right. Or I'm not saying didn't have the right. It's just different. They're not
Right.
they're at all in line with anything.
Right. So the only thing I can't comment on what was presented to you previously for the budget committee. I can tell you that these numbers come specifically from the accounting software that we use as it records the actual expenditures for each of the following years. I do know that prior budget documents were based on spreadsheets where numbers were input into created spreadsheets, which is fine to do that, but it doesn't always compare apples to apples. So when you're looking at numbers, some of those numbers could be different or might have a different breakdown here. But I also can't comment to the accuracy of numbers that were previously presented. All I can tell you is that these are the numbers that were actually reported in the accounting software, which is where all these numbers came from.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I had a question. So we had can you give us a time of when the audit is going to be presented?
I have a minimal copy of the audit that I received last week. And we'll be getting it posted on the website. It's enough to release our state school funding, but it is not complete in its entirety. Our CFA and our single audits have still not been done. So I reached out to the auditors and they are going to prepare a letter for the board for our next board meeting, explaining what the delay is and why this has taken so long. So you will see that in your next board packet. But as far as the actual numbers from the audit, these numbers are correct. So they do match with the audit.
Are we currently not having funds released? Are they being held currently?
Currently, yes. Well, I will say they've all been released and will come in our May payment.
But they were being held.
Yes,
Can I ask for how long they've been held?
since January.
So when we're talking about the prior budgets that the budget committee and board had looked at, you're saying that those were in a Excel spread generated from in Excel, but based on you're using the same budgeting system as had been used in prior years.
I just don't know what numbers were used to build the Excel spreadsheets. So this document looks different than the previous budget documents that you guys have had. And it's straight from our accounting software.
It was the same software as in past or new
Yes.
software?
Yes.
I guess because
Well,
I
we're
hear what
used
you're
to-
saying.
We're used to looking at it in one way, so now like
Well-
trying to make sense of things, it's like a double load here, like every year it's a lot, but.
I guess I'm uncomfortable when I look at some of the actuals from like 2020 to 2021. The actual that is in the proposed this year budget is 253,318,000. And when it was reported in priors, it was 254.
Which number are you looking at? I'm sorry.
That's okay, page 7.
Okay.
And I'm looking at revenue, 2020 to 21. When I go to the budget for 2020-21, the money that's, or when I go to the last year's budget, what the actuals are different than what's in here.
Okay.
By about 754,000. And then when I look at the next page, it also is off by about 159,000. When I look at at page 12, the actual for 2020-21 is showing as 3,045,000, and in last year's, the actual for that same year was shown as 7,600,000. Page 13. We're showing it as 222,000, and last year the actual was reported as 219,000. Oh, that's probably enough input.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I can't tell you where those numbers came from because I don't know.
So let me try to understand. Accounting software that you use today, where you pulled a report from the accounting software, is exactly the same that has been used in this district for the past 2, 3, 4 years.
Since 2013.
Since 2013. So you went into the accounting software and you pulled a report for all the numbers as per was recorded before August of last year. You pulled these reports, you found everything, and then what you're saying is that previous reported budget that the documents that these ladies have was input from that software into a spreadsheet that was presented.
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
yes. But without knowing what method was used to create those numbers, I can't tell you where those numbers in the prior documents came from.
I have a follow-up question on that. Is the audit that's happening right now, is it looking back then? Or what is the time frame of this audit?
The audit that we're waiting on currently is for the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you. Any findings so far?
But just one line item that was over the budgeted amount.
Thank you.
I do have a question on the 2021-22 actuals. For what was budgeted, I'm looking at page 7, so right at the beginning.
Okay.
So what we had budgeted out was $258 million in 21-22, and the actuals are being reported at 78 million. Can I understand like why there's such a big difference on there? You know, that's almost $180 million difference from what we budgeted and what's on here.
So the difference is when the bond money was received, when proceeds from the bond were received. If they weren't received in the 2021 or if you anticipate them for the 21-22 school year and they don't come in until the 22-23, then they'll report in the 22-23 and not in the 21-22. So you might have anticipated when you were going to close on your bond, and that close date might have been extended. And so that revenue wasn't realized until the next year.
Okay, so then that would say like what we had budgeted out for 22-23, the actuals potentially could be higher because that bond shows up in that year versus the previous year, is what you're saying?
Well, ideally, when you do your budget for the 22-23, you would know that those bond funds would be available then in that year. So you would then budget again to have that increase in revenue for that year.
Okay, so like a beginning fund balance
Yeah.
rollover. Okay. In regards to the beginning fund balance, I was wondering for the 21-22 actuals that we had budgeted out to have, you know, beginning fund balances, and I'm not seeing them in the actuals. Is
So,
there reasoning there? I'm seeing it in multiple places, so I'm just kind of,
so in 21-22, the beginning fund balance was not recorded in the same fund that that we used to record beginning fund balances in. I missed going back in and putting that beginning fund balance manually in there for you. So that's on me. So, and I can correct that and put those in for the updated revised one. So
what you're saying is those beginning fund balances are lumped in one spot instead of spread out, or?
no, they're spread out by whichever fund they're in. But in 21-22, beginning fund balances were recorded in a 7,000 in the 7,700 fund, which beginning fund balance is recorded in a 5,400 fund. And so I just missed going back and adding the 50 on the 5,400, what that number from the 7,700 fund was. Or function, sorry.
Okay. So then when I see these updated numbers, does that change like the bottom line on like say the general fund? Would that increase that number then
It
or?
would increase your actual numbers, yes, because you'll have your beginning fund balance there.
Okay, understood.
Yes.
Seven, do you want to take to it right now or in a few minutes? Should I cut now or in a few minutes?
Sounds good.
Take a 10-minute break.
We are currently taking a 10-minute break.
To push that.
Let's go ahead and start again. There'd been mention of going it through page by page, or shall we just continue with questions? I'm sorry, page by page or questions? Okay,
If anyone has questions, now is the time, or we can just, if no one has questions, we can do page by page. I know I don't have any questions until we do the page by page.
I have questions. You have questions? Why don't you go?
Okay, so I do have a question about the funds that we had approved for school supplies and athletic fees. My understanding on that is that it will not continue next year, and that's fine. But I'd like to know kind of where we're at for this year currently and how effective that has been.
So we don't have final numbers from the high school yet on as far as what fees were waived so that we can pay that. But our plan is actually to continue to purchase some of the school supplies for next year out of some of the remaining ESSER funds.
So school supplies then for at elementary school then, or
We
what does that plan look like?
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to look at what our universal supplies at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the high school level, and we're going to purchase those universal supplies to help lessen the burden on the families. Instead of having to buy every single thing, they would only have to buy the specific things that might be required for their courses or special requests from teachers.
And what is the budgeted amount for that? Like, what is the impact? Since we're looking at, elementary, middle and high doing those universal supplies, how much funding is that versus what we had done previously, which was just elementary and middle school, I believe.
I think that included fees for high school.
So there was a portion for the athletic fees.
Yeah.
Because that impacted high school specifically, and then school supplies for younger kids because they don't have the participation fees. So kind of the offset was school supplies for them.
Mhm.
So what are we putting aside for that?
So this is basically just some of the funds that are available that are left from the SR2 that we need to spend before the September 30th deadline. And so right now we don't have an exact amount that we have set aside for that because we don't know exactly what that ending balance of SR2 is going to be. So my anticipation is that we'll probably spend close to $20,000 between school supplies and maybe offsetting some of the fees going into next year.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question on that. In one of the board meetings in the past, we talked about a couple of the labs that were returning. Physics was returning and chemistry. That there was a fee of $20, and I think it's important that there is no such fee for these two subjects. Were you able to work that out in the budget so that for these two labs, physics and chemistry, students would not have to pay a fee for it?
We did not include any fees for those classes.
Great.
Can we go back to the portion of the budget that was used for athletic fees?
Okay.
That was out of ESSER, correct?
Yes,
ESSER2.
yes,
And you said you don't have a full report from the high school.
I do not have floor.
When do you anticipate a full report from the high school?
I would anticipate we'll get that closer to the end of the school year. So around the 1st of June, maybe, to see exactly what all of those fees were.
Okay,
for.
and this was our second year of doing that, correct?
Yes, I would assume
Okay.
so.
Yes, it was our second year of doing that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we can have a breakdown of particularly of the high school, how those fees were used. Were they used mostly for athletic? Because it was activity fees, not athletic. Did it go mostly towards athletic? Did it go towards some of the arts? And was there an equal distribution if the portion went to athletics due to Title IX?
Okay, and I can work on getting totals for those for you based on what the secretaries at the high school have kept track of as far as paying those fees. It's my understanding pretty much if anybody applied for them, they were given the waiver and those fees were covered. It was not, so there wasn't an actual this much set aside for athletics and this much set aside for arts. It was whatever was needed to cover all of those. So it was all inclusive, is my understanding. But I will get you numbers for that.
Okay, sorry, can I clarify? You said anyone who applied for it, or was it?
Anybody who needed those funds. So apply is probably a bad word because if you're covering all of those fees, it wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't be applying for it, but anybody who needed those fees covered, or it was in a covered program that those fees were covered. Cover.
I get it.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
So in essence, then, whatever fees were covered for high school athletics for male athletics, the same portion would be for female athletics, correct?
It's what the students need. If 10 volleyball players needed help, but only 2 football players needed help, okay. If it's the other way around, okay, right? It's whatever students wanted to participate and needed their sports tuition covered, it was covered. We didn't say, sorry, there's a quota, and it was all.
But there wasn't it was just if a student said, hey, I can't cover it.
If a student approached the coach and the athletic director with, can't come up with this, then it was covered.
Okay.
there's also a certain amount that is written up for families who maybe had a fee that was still on their account. At the end of the year, that money was used to pay those off.
Okay.
I do have a follow-up question on that. My understanding of what we had approved on that was that it would go towards, participation fees for, fine arts, for sports, whatever, and there was kind of a bucket. What I'm hearing on the feedback is that this is more scholarship, not it's going towards participation fee. So are we talking a scholarship where someone had to ask for it and we're still you were putting out that there's a participation fee, but you can ask to have it waived? I'm a little confused on language here.
Yeah, the expectation is if you're in a sport or an activity and there's a fee that you pay it. If you can't pay it, you approach the leadership and it gets waived. I don't know why that's.
No, I don't think it's confusing. I think it's two different ways of how it was heard from last year's meeting of how it would work out. So there was never, I don't think, a kind of like a flow chart of how it would work. And so I think some perceptions are different than what actually happened.
Yeah, I don't think a flow chart is necessary. I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah,
Somebody
how-
wants to
how-
play a sport
How would?
and yes, I mean, it's
Well,
have the money, pay. Don't have the money, we got you.
Well, I can give an example of how it was different because
you.
I think it did happen for 2 years. My daughter was in 8th grade for the first year back from COVID. And I remember, there's not the sports there, but the class fees for art were waived across the board. So it might have been by school, by principal. We haven't spoken of middle school. We've only talked about elementary and high, but so I think that could be how they use the funds there because we didn't have to pay any fees for her classes in middle school.
And I don't know that those programs. I don't know that those program specific fees were covered by ESSER money. I think those program fees were just waived across the board. I don't think there was when you're looking at the middle school and high school classes where there was a fee to take a specific class, I think those class fees were just waived for everybody.
So can we have a clear outline of the expectations and the process for the 2023-24 ESSER2 fees for supplies and activities?
I guess what exactly do you, do you want us to break it down to this is how much we'll allocate towards athletics and this is how much for fine arts? I mean, I don't know.
I'm not asking for a breakdown. I'm asking, I just need a clear kind of definition of the purpose of it for an equity lens. We can come back to it also.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe I'll get clarity between now and then.
We can come, how about we say, well, we'll come back to it.
Okay.
So my understanding is we are switching from, we're switching to the trimester system next year, correct?
Correct.
Is there any expenditures due to that? And what would that be?
It doesn't necessarily change the cost of what we pay for staffing because it doesn't change the length of time during the day.
So from a expenditure perspective, the switch does not impact the budget. If we were still in two semesters versus 3 trimesters, is that what we call it? No, please, you know, that switch does not impact our budget, correct?
Well, so instead of typically a school year is 36 weeks, instead of 2 18s, it's 3 12s. Yeah, it still fits into the contract with the teachers. Their 191 day contract still fits in there. It is a benefit that we did increase math teachers in the 3 secondary buildings. That helps, but no, we don't need to go out and hire a number of teachers to work in the trimester because the trimester demands more staff or anything like that.
So I can rest assured that money wise, it's, I'm going to give a number, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, or 1,001 here, 1,999 there. It's not a significant change to this.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know about 0.01%, but you know,
It should be more about credits, and that's, you can offer a half credit in 1.5 credits per year versus 2 or 1 credit. So a semester counts as a half credit. A trimester will count as a half credit. So you can offer 1.5 credits. And that it translates that way. It's math horror for a lot of the counselors, because then they end up doing a lot of math on how many percentages, and it ends up being a big headache for counselors when they're working that math, but that's what the difference is.
and to your point, the counselors have to, you know, you're a student and I have to get your schedule lined up 3 times rather than twice.
But again, it's outside of the scope of this meeting, but my understanding is that counselors at a high school advocated for this.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
So does that change like the number of in-service days because you need one at the end of each trimester?
Yeah, so instead of 2, that'd be grading days.
Grading days.
I think somewhere we mentioned that we were adopting a new math curriculum, correct? Any estimation of how much that will cost? And it comes out of this year's budget, correct? Or next year's?
It'll come out of the budget right here. Yeah,
Okay.
so next year. And we're actually going to present a timeline for that at our May 23rd board meeting. So,
And Heather, you said earlier is about 1 million, what we're looking at.
and we don't know for sure right now.
Right,
But
yeah, that's a
ballpark.
guesstimate.
And is that coming out of general fund?
That will be the last curriculum purchased out of ESSER funds.
What's the next curriculum adoption after that?
Science, social studies.
Social studies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
The PERS fund or the PERS bond, wasn't that due to be retired, or am I remembering that wrong?
It is coming up on retirement. I still believe that there's about 1.5 years left on it.
Okay. And so we've still got to budget this year
Yes.
and then, okay.
Is it anticipated after the end of this year that we will be adding to our ending fund balance, or will we be taking from it?
At the end of which year?
Sorry, 22, 23.
So we are actually projecting an increase in ending fund balance from this year moving into next over what was projected at as the beginning fund balance this year.
Do you have an estimate on what that number looks like?
Yeah, so on your revenues for the general fund, we're going from a 7.2 estimate, which I believe came in as an actual about 7.7 to about 8.5. On page 11. On line 5,400. So this year it was budgeted at 7.2 million. I believe we're going to, the audited number was like 7.7 million. And we anticipate for next year being 8.5 as a beginning fund balance.
So I do have a question on page 11 with the 1960 fund. With that number on there, like there's wild swings on there between the different years. Can you give a little more information on that?
So part of this are, these are like a flexible spending account that employees contribute into, and maybe they don't spend all their money. So the district will receive some of the money from the prior year back at the end of the year. And that money comes back to the district. So there's significant swings based on how much people use versus what they've contributed out of their paychecks for that pre-tax benefit. So, and I believe that's the same on their HRA.
Can you tell me about legal fees? What our budget was 350,000 for 22, 23, 23, 24, 75,000. Where are we with our budget of the 350,000? And are we feeling 75,000 is a good projection? I'm sorry, that came out inappropriate and wrong. I apologize. Not that it's not a good projection, but I'll leave my question at that.
Okay.
What page are we on? When, I would appreciate it if we ask questions.
I apologize. It's page 51. Page 51, 382.
Okay, so what I can tell you is that right now, we're currently, I believe, right at 240,000 for the current year. We have a lot of these claims that will be wrapping up, and we will have a smaller amount as far as what is, and it's not page 51. It's page 50. So
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Sorry.
On the new one, it's page 50. On
Oh.
the old one, it's probably 51.
I apologize. I'm
no,
looking
you're
at the
fine.
Old where my notes are.
Yeah. Let's see, which line item was it?
What function?
Oh, that's off, it's the wrong one.
It's function 2310.
Function 2310. And it's 382, but I'm looking at 49.
Yeah, it's page 49,
Sorry, I'll go off the new one.
and it's 382, which is legal services. So yes, we are most likely not going to spend the full $350,000. And as some of these cases wind down, and we have fewer and fewer claims, I do feel that 75,000 is enough to cover us for the next year.
What is the number of so far spent out of this 350 that was budgeted?
I believe it's like 243 or 263,000. So there's almost $100,000 left still in there.
Thank you.
Heather, do you have since we're on this subject, do you have kind of a breakdown of what those expenses were for?
The expenses in the legal services.
Yeah. I mean,
Well-
I've heard some were for hiring lawyers, some were for settling HR cases and stuff like that. That all comes out of the legal.
Yes, and so do, like if you have to have a special education consultation with legal, all of that comes out of there. There's numerous, any kind of legal thing. When we work with Willamette ESD, and they provide legal counsel for everyday things, any charges that arise from that will come out of it, whether it's just for routine business. But any kind of HR, reach out to get some kind of legal advice, or you're going to have a charge with that. And it's going to be charged to that legal services fee. It's not all just a
Gotcha.
lump sum for one particular item.
So anytime we refer to
Yes.
Legal about maybe an action that we're trying to do or something, that's
Yes.
charged to it also.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Where does the, I don't recall the number, but the recall that took place a year ago, it was significant, and it's on the district, right? We got billed for the recall by the county.
Probably.
Do you remember?
It probably,
Would it come out of this or somewhere else?
I would have to look back to see exactly where it was classified, if it was classified under election costs or whether it was under legal costs. But it most likely would have been charged to the board of directors.
Which is 388 maybe? Or that's election.
Yeah. Yeah, so it could have been charged to that. Without looking, I can't tell you exactly where it was charged. Yeah, it's a $40,000 increase over the prior year.
Page 74, function 2131. Line 240.
Function, which function? I'm sorry.
2131. Oh, sorry. The total function 2131.
Okay.
And then under salaries, it would be 240 contractual employee benefits.
Under 2131.
Health service direction.
You're looking at 86.4.
2131.
No,
I'm looking up the new one, I promise. Page
242.
74.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes, I'm looking at 86.4. Sorry, I was looking for the function 86.4.
I jumped across. So she's looking at 86,400.
Okay.
Yes,
123.24 as compared to
Okay.
0 in years past.
Okay,
thank you.
okay, so
You're a mind reader.
okay, so when we budget for health insurance, we assume that every employee who is eligible is going to take the health insurance. So when we are building our projected payroll, we put those costs into one object code, which is the major object code of 240. And then as those expenditures actually come in, they're divided between what's dental, what's vision, what is actual health insurance rate. And so those are split out, but when we report them to the state, we report them all as a 240. So when you're looking at that contractual employee benefit, that is their health insurance premium for the entire year.
For the 4.6 licensed members.
For
Correct.
any member in that group that, yes,
Got it. Okay,
yes,
thank you.
yes.
I have a question on page 12.
Okay.
Sorry, we're just gonna wear out the pages.
You're fine.
Page 12. So I have a question when it comes to the funds in this grant. And obviously we've got, some big swings. Can you kind of describe these numbers a little bit more and where we've got, like 21-22 is 1.9 million. And then it goes to like 7.7 million. Now we're budgeting like.
So those were the
2.7.
ESSER funds that we talked about. That was the change, the swing for ESSER funds.
Okay. And then,
ESER 3 that came in, and ESER 3 was the fix.
Yes, yes.
1, 2, 3. ESER
Yeah.
3 was the big drop that happened.
so in the 3299 line, what is that one?
So I'm not really sure what was budgeted in state grant revenue under a federal grant fund. So I did not budget anything under state grant revenue because this is strictly for federal grant funds. So I don't know what that $6,222,002 was. But we have not realized any of that revenue, and I did not continue to budget for that because I couldn't figure out where that or what that money was from.
Restricted grants. Other. Okay.
So a restricted, and the 3299 means that it is state funded. Which typically would fall in a 260 account, 260 fund, which is state and other grant funds. It would not fall under the 201 for federal.
Okay. And then page 13. With the fund 202 miscellaneous, what is that?
The which miscellaneous or
19.
1990 miscellaneous.
I can't tell you in 21-22 what was budgeted in there. They may have had an insurance claim on some of the property that they were collecting rent on. And that may be an insurance premium payment that was refunded back to them. I would have to go back and look to see exactly what in the prior years was recorded as revenue for that.
Okay. Page 15, student body funds. How is that defined?
So student body funds are fundraisers that are done at the school level. And those funds are typically managed at the school level. We just oversee them and we have to account for them in our budget and in our audits. So what we do is we just estimate what we anticipate the various different revenues being. And then when it comes time for audit, the actual numbers are audited in a single entry to record the student body expenditures, revenues, and beginning fund balances for the prior year. And those are usually done as the audit is completing.
Okay.
Can we jump to page 76?
Sure.
And then I'm looking at total fund 2211, improve instructional direction, and then total fund 2222 library media center assessment and testing. Can you tell me more about that?
On the Library Media Center last year, they budgeted for all library books to come out of ESSER money. We moved that expense back to the general fund this year because we know that we need to start moving some of those long-term expenses that we're going to continue to have back to the general fund. So we didn't budget for library books in the ESSER fund. Instead, we added it back to the general fund at each school level.
Okay. So if I turn, excuse me. If I went to, I'm just trying to connect dots. If I went to ND, which starts on page 139. Can you tell me where I'd find it?
So if you would go to page 146. And in the top section under line 430, you would see $5,000 for library books. So the $50,000 out of ESSER split between all of the schools averaged out to about $5,000 for library books. So that's what each school was given for library books.
Got it. Does assessment work the same way?
Assessment.
Yes. Somebody else has a question, go for it. So I gotta find my page. Page 79. So. Old book, page 79. That's gonna be new.
76.
Thank you. So 22-23, it was roughly 1.8 million, and now we're at proposing 250.
Let's see.
That's why I was asking if assessment worked the same way, because I wasn't sure if it just.
Well, and the problem is that we don't know that if this is like which grant fund this is, because it could be any federal grant fund that is going to fall under this category. So it looks like this was intended to buy some kind of computer software for the current year. And we don't have that expense planned for next year, so it wasn't budgeted for next year.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Did we add new software? Sorry.
Not that I'm aware of.
Follow-up question.
Yeah,
Did we add new software?
not that I'm aware of.
Because as I look at line 200 associated payroll cost, computer software, 1.6 million. Which would be on page 76.
I don't know that if that has been spent as much as it might have been a placeholder for something.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So. So if I understand correctly, 2021, 2022, there was a line item budget for computer software for $6,000. Is that what you're talking about?
No, 1.6 million,
In 22-23
22, 23.
on page 76.
Page 76.
Associated,
About third column over, about 4 lines up. For the bottom, third column, 4 lines up.
Okay. Right behind my little ring. Got it.
Above the ring.
Sorry about that.
no, it's okay.
Yeah,
You're good.
so 2022, 2023, we have that line item and we don't know whether we spent it or not,
For what it's for.
or what that was for.
Apparently it was for computer software,
Mhm.
but I am not aware of us spending $1.6 million on computer software.
Okay.
Find out.
Okay, can we investigate that?
Yes.
Just and look at the actuals. Thank you.
I have a question about the Fund 252 High School Success. So this is gonna be, well, I'm looking at the revenue side, so page 18.
Page 18 on the revenue.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Tell me more. What is high school success?
This is measure 98.
Measure 98.
Yeah.
And we have nothing on the 22-23 budget.
I don't know why there's no number showing up there.
So we're, question about high school success, in general, when it comes to expenditures. Where are we currently at with that fund and that expense?
I would have to pull an expenditure report. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head where we're at as far as spending that, but it's a fund that it's a grant fund from the state that the high school submits a budget for every single year. And then they have to spend within that budgeted amount what they say they're going to spend that money on, and then they report on it every year. So this is just the amount that they presented to the state of Oregon for what their 23-24 anticipated expenditures are going to be based on how much revenue they're supposed to receive.
Gotcha. Okay. So then you'll go back on why there's no on
Yeah.
the budget portion. Okay, thank you. And then similar question on next page with the state and local grants.
I will have to check and see why there's no budget numbers that showed up there.
Okay. Page 19.
Could that be where, on page 12, could that be where the $6 million is on, under federal grants, that's state grants, that's the same account 3299? There's nothing in prior
It-
year budgets also?
It could be, although then your funds wouldn't balance.
I just see kind of a lot
Yeah.
of 3299 spread out
Yeah.
on that 1 year.
Yeah, you can have a 3299 in every fund,
Okay.
except you wouldn't normally have a 3299 in a federal
Federal.
fund.
Right.
I feel like it's pretty straightforward to look through here and see where the revenue is. How would you suggest we go through this somewhat methodically to look at the expenses and see like what's standing out? What do you want to point out? What's helping with students be successful? Where is that math curriculum showing up? Like how can we do this a little more to show a little more of what this budget is doing for our students? Because I mean, I feel like sitting here right now, like I could go home and study this, but I'm in like a bit of a spot where I'm like not able to ask good questions and utilize our time effectively.
I do think budgets that I've worked on in the past, the vast majority of budget stays the same. There's some typical roll-up costs, but they fundamentally stay the same. I like to let everybody know that for the most part, the budget's the same, other than here, we added 3 math teachers. Here, we added an SRO. Here, we've done this. Is that what you're talking about?
Kind of, yeah, but like we have a huge printout here. And what you're talking about is in there somewhere.
Yeah, so I agree. I think we could prepare that. That'd be easy. Prepare the changes above just kind of typical year to year roll up. Yeah.
And I think something that would help me kind of understanding this budget is, how it equates to, if we're looking at each school, you look at one school and they, gain some teachers. You look at another school, they've lost teachers, but there's nothing to correlate that. So like having enrollment numbers to kind of go with that of like, okay, well, here's what our estimate is for number of students at that school that justifies that change, up, down, whatnot. And then being able to understand, like what is our spending per student to kind of see, how much are we spending on one student at that school based on all these numbers? That would be helpful just for me personally to understand.
Yeah. I would use a little caution with just assuming that if a school increases 20 kids, that means another teacher. Because those 20 kids could be spread out among 6 grades, 3 kids a grade. You don't need another teacher. Or it could be all 20 kids in one grade, you need another teacher. And so the number doesn't tell the whole story. And I would just give you that caution that's why we meet with the principals and talk to them about what they need. That's why the principal tell us, hey, I've got this big bubble coming in. And, this year I got by with 27 in a classroom, but I've already been told we're getting 4 more kids. I'm going to need 2 teachers, that kind of stuff. And so sometimes an influx of 5 kids can make a difference. Sometimes with staffing, sometimes an influx of 30 kids maybe don't. Right. So it's not direct correlation, if you follow me.
Understood. Yeah, absolutely. But also knowing like, the kind of class average size also, like, okay, well, if your average size is kind of getting towards that, 23, 24 average, then, obviously that kind of correlates, a little bit better. just understanding those metrics. And, saying that, staffing level stays the same. That's great, except that big second grade class now moves up to third grade. Well, now you need a third grade teacher and your second grade class, is shrunk. So FTE stays the same, but that doesn't mean the, person that's there is staying the same. There could be shuffling and switching between them. So I think it's kind of, staffing level stays the same. That doesn't mean who you see in that, school stays the same. Because they may have to shift to another school or shift to, grade level up or down, to cover that if possible. They may have to hire a different teacher. So, I want to understand kind of, okay, well, what does this school look like that goes with this number? How many kids do we have at this school versus another school and so on? I think that would help.
Yeah, I think Heather already said she
Yeah.
wants you.
And also, as I can see that we are gearing towards having more information to deep our discussions for next meetings, because it seems that we are having a little bit of a hard time to read or find questions on the budget. So do I understand correctly that, because you did a presentation telling us exactly what changed, right? What are the things that we should look forward here? So do I understand correctly that you're going to come to this next meeting with, okay, let's talk about this thing that changed? Go to page.
And I'll actually email that to you before the next meeting so that you can have that to review with the budget document. So that then you can understand it. And if you have questions, you can come back and ask those questions.
That will be super helpful because it will help us, have these discussions, because right now I think we're short on understanding to ask questions, I guess.
I would also recommend if you have questions and you have them, email Heather. So she can, if it's a quick one, she can answer it right there. If it's not a quick one, it gives her time to research and then she's prepared to answer them during the meeting.
Can I add to that? Because that is a great idea. If we could use the budget committee email address, that way it goes to all budget committee members, and that way I might have the same question as somebody else. So it just kind of it kind of makes it easier for you, right? You don't get 5 people asking the same question. And it could be more efficient time-wise.
Yes, absolutely.
That would be great. So I'm all for emailing those questions, but if we could use the budget committee email address, then we all get the questions and the answers, which is helpful.
This is my second time doing this and I'm not an accountant. You can go through and get caught in the weeds in all this stuff. I guess my question is, as we look ahead to the next meeting and stuff is, a budget should mirror or reflect what our goals and stuff are for the district, right? And I'm big on lessons learned. So, this school year, how did the budget work? And how do we tie that to student performance and success, right? And then maybe what could we do better? And how is that reflected in the proposed budget? You guys are talking about hiring more ELD math teachers or arithmetic teachers. So I guess to me, it's important to highlight that, right? Where are we spending the money? And what do we expect to get out of it? And how are we going to measure that? Right. So I guess that's just my thoughts on this. And then going back in a synopsis on what changed and why did it change, from 22-23 to 23-24.
Yeah, and not to look back at prior years, because I you are not able to answer the whys and, you know, why, how come it was like this? And, but, for our clear understanding of, because when we look at a line and we see a huge number and the next one we don't, it's like, why is that? And I think it'd be good to, just in your presentation, because I think you have a very deep understanding of this, kind of let us know, okay, and I think you did, it's just that looking at the columns and the numbers and the, you know, in this fund, number down, page, whatever, you will see this different, and this is why. I think it'll be very helpful for us all to, you know, just not be shocked. And I don't want to say ask silly questions, but, you know, like, oh, why is that such a difference? Well, she already told us why. It's because of this. So it'll be very helpful for us. Okay.
I do have a question about the contingency and unappropriated ending fund balance on page 62 at the bottom. So historically speaking, like taking away COVID, let's just pretend it didn't exist for a moment. Prior to that, the district had ended up in a bad situation where we had very little funds at the end of the year. And it was kind of a vow of the board that we will not do this again. And it has been a goal from that point forward that each year we don't want to spend down our funds, and that we want to try and build on that ending fund balance to make sure that we don't get back to that situation where, you know, you kind of get a slap in the face and you got to make major cuts right away. So we want to build that cushion. Now, again, pretend COVID didn't exist. We've been building that ending fund balance for a number of years, and then kind of came down to where we were budgeting all the way down to nearly our minimums of, you know, we can't go past this point. With our contingency and unappropriated ending fund balance that's on this budget, where does that put us at the end of the year? Are we building on that cushion at the end of the year? Are we staying the same? Are we dwindling it down? Like, where does that put us?
So I can tell you in this budget that there is a slight decrease projected for the end of next year. And you'll see that in the unappropriated ending fund balance is dropped a little bit, but it's unfair to say that you have to take COVID out of it, because so many items were moved out of the general fund and put into those ESSER funds. And now that the ESSER funds are going away, we have to move those items back in. There's no way not to. So in an attempt to not affect the instruction of our students, there is a small reduction in that unappropriated ending fund balance for next year. Do I think that we will actually hit that low of a number? Probably not, because even though we budget to spend the entire amount of revenue that we say we're going to get in, reality is we never spend 100% of that revenue. So while we're prepared to take a little bit of a shortfall at the end of next year, I don't know that it will actually be necessary, and we may actually see a higher number in next year's proposed budget going into the 24-25 school year.
Son, if we go ahead. So if we see a, drop in enrollment, is it, safe to say that with this budget, we're kind of going a little more conservative?
Yes.
In that we're kind of building in cushions here and there to try and lessen the impact if like enrollment numbers don't come in where we, hope it will be.
Okay.
So as she originally said, the budget was built on 9.9 billion.
Mhm.
Most school districts are budgeting on 10, 10.1, some even 10.2. There are some that are doing 10.3. We've decided to be conservative and budget at 9.9. I think it's fair to say we will hit 10. We don't know, but like I said, most districts are not budgeting at 9.9. They're budgeting higher. So we've got that built-in conservative right there.
Part of this is, it's so late, I can't remember. What was the governor's budget last year? I know, I can't remember.
Yeah, the biennium, not last year, but it was
you're right.
9.3 in the last, in
Okay.
this current biennium, and the upcoming biennium's 9.9. We're hearing rumors that it could hit 10 to 10.1, but we don't want to hang our hats on rumors. We want to hang our hat on what the governor said and what the that other Ways and Means Committee. That's where we landed on the 9.9. So you may see a more of a cushion in your ending fund balance based, other than because we're on the conservative side of 9.9. But if it comes in at 10, 10.1, you're going to see a bump in that number.
I think it's a really good idea that we are budgeting on 9.9 because it's the first time that both groups are so close together in the amount. And so I don't think we'll see a lot of swing one way or the other. Okay. I don't know if we can answer this question or not. 9.3 for the last biennium. And now we're looking at 9.9. Thinking of inflation. With our 9.9 now, and with inflation, are we at a maintain level? Or I've heard that we really, as a state, need to be at about 10.3 to maintain. Does that question make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
I totally get what you're saying. And I think it depends on how what your spending habits are in your district. I think that some districts will need the 10.3 to continue the current level of services they have. I think that Newburgh has been pretty conservative over years that they can survive with minimal impact to their unappropriated ending fund balance and still budget at the 9.9. So I believe that all the services that we are currently providing, plus the ones that are included in this budget, can be provided with minimal impact based on that 9.9 budget, and that we're not going to be dependent on getting a 10.3 to keep all of our staff.
You know, and Kat, what you mentioned from 9.3 to 9.9, that's 600 million. That's a 6.4% increase from 9.3 to 9.9. And you mentioned inflation. Inflation over 2 years has ate up more than 6.4%.
That's been about 8.
Yeah, so it on paper, 9.3 to 9.9 looks pretty great, but when you start looking at it and look at all the angles, it's not a ton.
Agree, it's not a ton. It's about 6% and inflation has gone up about 8.5%. But what I'm hearing is that budgeting at 9.9, even with our increase in FTE that we're planning for and our decrease in student enrollment that we're predicting, and our shift in not having as much ESSER funds over the next biennium that we're planning for, we are still going to be fine financially.
Yes, this budget is balanced.
Is there an estimate on when the final number from the state's gonna come in?
Sometime before July 1st. It's usually mid to late June.
Yeah, it's middle of June. Yeah.
Till we get the final,
Around
final, yeah.
17th. But remember, the state numbers can adjust over the next 2 years as well, which makes her job extremely difficult.
But I think it's fair to say, you know, 9.9 safe.
So
If I was betting, I think we might hit 10. But my household budget, I would go 9.9. I think here we go 9.9. If we go 10, we've got extra cushion. Just And there are definitely districts, some of the larger districts that are counting on 10-3. And they're gonna be hurting.
Even if we made it to 10. Yes, thank you. Even if we made it to 10, I don't think that it would be great because it is more money, but it's not enough of an incremental amount. That would make large impacts. It'll make smaller impacts.
Well, and not only that, but I've talked to all of my administrators and talked to Heather about it and said, if we do hit 10-1 or 10, we're not going to spend it. Because I do think there's going to be a turn and I'd rather be prepared. So
you're saying that would go in the ending, it be in the ending fund balance, like we're not going to halfway through the year, hire someone or 2 or 5.
my intent is to not grow the budget. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee there might be a need that comes up, but my intent would be to not grow the budget. Yeah.
Can we entertain the thought of being finished for tonight?
Yes.
Okay, so that that would require a motion, please.
Can I?
Oh, yes,
Stop you.
yes, please.
Okay.
Oh,
Do we have any public comment? Okay, so. I'm going to call for public comment because we need to make sure that we cover that because it was posted in the paper. So if there was any online questions, they can be submitted through the Zoom link. If there's any audience questions, we would take those at this time.
thank you for remembering that. I forgot.
It's all right, it's late.
Yeah.
Not as late as it could have been.
I'm like in bed by now. Yes. Do we need?
I make a motion for us to table discussions for tonight, and start again, pick up conversation in our next, meeting, which is scheduled for
May 16th.
May 16th. Okay. I make that motion. I'll second it.
Is there discussion? Kim, I think you had a discussion.
So then, has the meeting for the 16th been posted yet, or it's going to be?
It's posted.
It's posted. Okay. Understood. Thank you.
All those in favor for adjourning the meeting tonight and reconvening May 16th? Raise your hands. Opposed?
I was agreeing.
Abstaining? Meeting is adjourned at 8:37. Thank you.